Latitude. Gotland mo siw qualified seats down to all chat to provide to us. Looking around to see if I recognize anyone. I think I might recognize Mark after about 15 minutes. I was like, oh, I do know that guy. That kind of happens in the Indian community, right? I'm going to speak a little bit to my specialty. I've been working in our tribal languages for about 25 years now. And it's something that I think that came to me. I studied to be a teacher. My first goal was to become an environmentalist. So I went to Northwest City College up in Lummi, and I started studying, taking some biology classes, things like that. That just didn't seem right, just didn't feel right to me. And so I decided to go into counseling. And I thought, oh, okay, I'll take a couple counseling classes. Maybe I was in my early 20s, probably just right after high school, 19, 20. I graduated at age 17. And so took a couple classes, and just somebody asked me a question. So, do you understand what counseling is? And I was like, what? I don't know, I just want to help people. That's all I want to do. And so I ended up learning a little bit about what counseling was, and they said, have you ever experienced drug addiction? Have you ever experienced alcoholism, or those types of, so those were the things that were being asked to me, am I going to be able to empathize, basically? I know that word now, but back then I didn't know. And I was like, no, this isn't for me. This isn't something that I feel like, I can still talk to people and help people and understand. And so trying to find the right field to go into, there was no guidance. That was in 87, 88, 89. There was no guidance to guide us in the right direction, to how to help us find our gift, right? Because our gifts were given to us a little differently, back in the days when our ancestors lived and we traveled everywhere. We were able to find our gift and what we were supposed to do for our communities. It came naturally. We were raised with it. We automatically knew because our parents were guiding us, our grandparents were guiding us, the village was guiding us, this is what you need help with. Those type of things don't happen the way it used to. and mine was more Western, I would say. Went through a public school, graduated from high school, and then when I finally decided, you know, well, I was just going to go to school, they said, well, start with your 2-year degree, let's start there. So somebody finally gave me some guidance, and it happened to be a tribal member. So I was really happy that they were understanding, okay, let's start in the beginning, let's just start, you know, get your education. Went through a couple different programs, early learning, did some work study, and then they opened up a program called Oxala up at Lummi in partnership with Washington State University. And so I went straight for, I think, 6 years doing 2 different programs, a minor in special education and then a bachelor's in K-8 education. And so it was a really good program. We started out with like 30-some students from around Washington, and only 6 of us graduated after the program was over. And so people along the way got lost. Maybe they migrated into a different program or dropped out, but I actually don't remember what happened to most of our students that participated. So helping and understanding where our people are, and not only in their educational level, but as a community member, who they are and who they identify, how they identify themselves as a community member. Some might identify themselves as somebody who helps out in the environment, gathering shellfish or gathering plants or gathering, and so they're exposed to all these different things. We don't know their environmental factors that's affecting them. And so I think those are really important things to think about. And here in the Seattle area, I moved down here and I think it's still gonna work. There it goes. In 2000, maybe you weren't supposed to hear that. So anytime it goes like that, you're not supposed to hear it. Just, you know, close your ears, go like that, like the doctor said here. And I, you know, trying to find my way and learning a little bit more about my Duwalnish ancestry, not knowing how far and wide our people were displaced, how far and wide our people were forced to migrate by the federal government. And it took a lot of resilience for our people. There's a lot of generational trauma that still exists in our communities. And being able to focus on that and understand how our people had to endure those things. And this is just in the Seattle area. I can only imagine what it's like in the more rural areas, in the areas where you have to drive an hour just to receive services. And not only that, you have to drive an hour if you don't have an electric car, or if you do, or you have to have gas. You have to also work that into your travel. You know, there's a lot of different things that goes into servicing a person from the community and understanding them and having that empathy. And so studying to be a teacher, I started understanding, you know, how we need to pay attention to the people around us. I never really, you know, thought about that. I just, you know, was a Lummi reservation girl that just ran around and did whatever I wanted. And, you know, ran around in the woods, played in the river, played in the bays, waited for crab, dug oysters when we needed them, picked clams. Anything my parents ever told us to do, I just did. And little did I know that that was a cultural upbringing. That was a way of life. That's who we were, Chelangan. That's our way of life in Lummi. So, as I was growing up, and you know, thinking about how we fish in the river and how we utilize those type of, I guess, ways. You know, listening to your mom, listening to your dad, telling you you need to turn the boat left, you need to turn the boat right. You know, listening to those directions. Those are things that were helping me practice to listen. And that's not something that people do in our communities. We want to participate, we want to be involved, and being able to open up your ear. And I was listening to the doctor here talk about ask people how they are. When you ask that question, I'm asked that question when I go to the tribal clinic. You know, they say, how are you? How do you feel? And I tell them, and my mind instantly, working with our tribal languages, for 25 years, I started realizing that that question is a really, really important question. Our tribal languages come from the condition of how we are and the action that we are doing. And that's with the Duwalnish language. We either are away or we are performing some sort of action. And that's been a generational inherent sense that we've been conditioned with for our entire life. And that's the way our Coast Salish languages are. And if we don't look at what our condition is, whether it's the state of being in our mind or our physical state, we're not truly going to know how we are. And if we don't know about the actions that we're going to perform, or that we're performing at this moment, we're not going to know what we're doing. And looking at tribal languages, and I'm not exactly sure what places are represented around here. I kind of recognize people. Getting a little old, you start to forget people. And that's something that I think I've seen that dementia thing out there. And I was like, I know I don't have dementia, but I think I can think about it and then try to remember. So when I started studying to become a teacher and I started teaching in the classrooms and understanding the children that I was going to be working with, and I think that was the most angry I've ever been, is when I took one special ed class, I failed it. The first one, it was children with exceptional behaviors. And I think it was probably titled something a little bit different, but that's what I thought it said, you know. And then I got to argument with the teacher. She was a teacher in Bellingham, and I started asking her questions that I think she felt uncomfortable with, and it was kind of frustrating for me because as a student, I was learning to understand what special education was, and what does that mean, and why, when she would say, well, this child is exceptional, and I said, okay, then why are you calling him special ed? What is the difference? And you know, she would get upset with me like, well, you know, and I was like, anybody who's exceptional in our community is gifted. And every single person in our community has a gift. And if it's not alive and it's not active, then it's sleeping and we have to feed it. And she wasn't liking to hear that. And so I ended up failing that class. And then one of the professors that helped with the partnership for this program, she took me for a walk, and back then, you know, she says, come on, let's go for a walk with Brett. And I was like, see, you guys weren't supposed to hear that. And so that was back in the day when I did smoke, and I just quit because when I started teaching, I just didn't smoke again because it just wasn't me. I wasn't around people that smoked, and of course kids don't, so, and I hated smelling like that when I walked into a classroom, and it was embarrassing actually. So we walked around a little bit, and she talked to me a little bit about the class that I just failed, supposedly, and I explained everything. She asked me all these questions, and I explained them in detail and my answers, and she was like, well, I think you did really well in that class. So she gave me basically an oral exam, and I ended up taking the class again because I had the confidence that I could pass it, and then I ended up passing it with flying colors because I was able to learn how to communicate with somebody who was not me, and somebody who wasn't born and raised like me, somebody who didn't have the parents I had, somebody who didn't have the community I had, somebody who didn't understand that sense of well-being that we have in our communities. Even though this person thinks that she does, she has it from her perspective. So if I look this way, and you're standing behind me and look that way, we have a different perspective. And so we just have to come to a common agreement. And so some of the things that I was able to do is write in detail some of my experience on how to deal with my, I guess, understanding of what special education is. And that kind of leads me into, I guess, my fight with our tribal languages. Special education is what's wonderful about it is that it's not part of who we are as Indigenous. It's a colonizing sense, and it's used for the English language. If you look at special education, there's different layers of it. There's physical disabilities, there's mental disabilities, and then there's disabilities for learning disabilities, and then there's impairment. And then there are all these different layers of special education in our schools. Our children, I focus a little bit more on learning disabilities and understanding how our children could stop being identified as disabled just because they had a lack of understanding of the English language. And so I fought for a long time for our children to become English proficient speakers. And that's a difficult thing because there really is no official proficient English language. Everybody's making it up along the way. And at the same time, English is made up of what, how many world languages? We're basically multilingual using English. And people don't really see that. And when we go into the area of study of how do we teach our tribal languages, and when our people in Duwalnish were so displaced that we're speaking many other tribal languages at the same time, English language. And so my ancestors were Peter James come from Peter James from the Duwalnish tribe and went north. And he fought really hard. I know is still fighting hard for the recognition of our people. And to understand what that means, that will never go away. That understanding of who my great-great-great-grandfather was, that will never go away. And nobody can ever erase my identity, because the blood that's in my body is from the Duwalnish, from the Skagit, from the Tlingit. I have many, many lines of DNA within me, and that can't be changed. No matter how much the federal government says, we don't recognize you. But like, that don't matter, because my ancestors recognize me when I speak the language, when I stand up for what is right for our people, and understanding that, and understanding who I am, I think really helps. And I think getting our community to create a program, I don't know how many communities are here. If we could do a shout out of different, we'll start over here. Like, what regions are there here? I know we only have a few minutes, but I kind of want to know so I can figure out how I can help tomorrow's presentation too. Over here, let's start over here. What, just like regions, where are you guys from?
Nisqually.
Say it again.
Nisqually.
Nisqually.
New Mexico.
I can't hear.
New Mexico.
New Mexico.
Alaska.
Alaska.
Montana. Blackfeet.
Over here. Let's just start saying them all. Everybody, it's the whole, every single indigenous community is probably represented, if not a large population of them. It saddens me that our people aren't able to witness you all. And I'm hoping that at some level this can be brought back to the community, because gatherings of everybody who's trying to help our communities in a healthy way is really important. And my hands go up to you. I do appreciate you. If you didn't hear that, I appreciate you. My hands go up to you all for everything that you're doing to try to help our communities. You know, there's a lot of missing links within our cultural awareness. Walking into a community, I mean, just to raise the hands, how many of you, when you first started your job in the community you're working in, how many of you were nervous? How many of you are still nervous? Yeah, you're nervous because we don't understand, and you know what, we're not going to fully understand ever. And coming to an acceptance and building that identification with each other, teach them about who you are, where you're from. And that's what I try to teach my students. I teach at Pacific Lutheran University, and I try to teach my students the first thing I need to know is who you are. Well, I had students from around the world, and understanding that they have an identity, they are who they are. They are people, they are human, they are here, and that's important. And I'm hoping that some of that will resonate with you today, is that you are important. And I hope that you can actually bring that out to your patients and the people you work for, and the communities you work for, because you are important and you were put here for a reason. And I really appreciate everything that you guys are doing. I look forward to tomorrow's presentation.